Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm going back and doing another character storyline review for Star Wars: The Old Republic. It's been quite some time since I did one of these, mostly due to me having taken a couple of breaks from playing Tor to just sort of focus on other games. But anyway, over the weekend I did finally finish the main character storyline for the Imperial Agent, and kind of wanted to bring you guys my thoughts on that. So I'm going to keep this reasonably spoiler free. There's just going to be a few details that come up here and then. So we're just going to talk briefly about the sort of character storyline, which I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail because you really don't want to spoil the twists and turns in the Imperial Agent storyline because they're really good. And then we'll talk a little bit about the characters. So just let's get right into things. I decided to play a male Chiss Imperial Agent because when I was doing my homework on trying to figure out, what exactly did I want to play as an Imperial Agent, it was mentioned that if you play as an alien, and particularly if you play as a Chiss, there are moments when you get special scenes or a little extra dialogue, and that really intrigued me. Additionally, the idea of playing an alien who was serving the Empire when the Empire is quite clearly um, very much a group of human supremacists, with the Sith purebloods being the notable exception, that seemed very interesting to me. And I was wondering, just what would it be kind of like to be a person in that position, and what kind of person would my character be to take on that role willingly? And you do, particularly if you play as a Chiss, you get to find out a little bit about who you were before you joined Imperial Intelligence, but the rest of it is really left up to you. And in my own head, like most players do, I did sort of start forming my own backstory for my character, but I'm not really going to get into that too awful much. Now, in general, though, from what I've observed on the forums and from fan reaction, most people consider the Imperial Agent storyline to be the best written storyline uh, for for the character classes. Now, I haven't finished all of the character classes, but so far I'm not inclined to disagree with them. The Imperial Agent storyline is really, really good. There are some really great twists and turns, stuff you just didn't see coming. It really does feel like you're in the midst of this epic, sprawling, espionage, intrigue, thriller storyline. I mean, you are basically Imperial James Bond, and it's a hell of a ride. I mean, it's just fun. You end up with a rival, someone who's very much a worthy opponent. You've got a powerful organization several powerful organizations that you ultimately come in major conflict with. Of course, you're an agent of the Empire, so the Jedi are going to be none too fond of you at all. Neither is the Republic's Strategic Information Service, sort of the Republic CIA. And this is one of those ones where it really feels like much more believable that you would make a lot of these morally ambiguous choices. Like with playing with the Sith, you really, a lot of the times, if you want to go full dark side, it really has to be you're just like a raving psychopath. And, it doesn't really give you those nuanced choices. It's really doesn't work that way. But when you're playing light side or an Imperial Agent, which is what I did most of the time, one of the nice things about this particular character class is that I took the diplomacy as one of my class skills. So if I did something really dark side and wanted to, say, for example, make sure I could maintain my level 5 light side to be able to use the level 5 relics, I just had to send my companions on a few diplomatic missions that were light side, and I could get my points back. So that was cool. But again, for playing somebody who's mostly light side working for the Empire, it does sort of fit into the theme in the Imperial Agent storyline that, as somebody who's a non-Force user in the Empire, you really do see clearly just how much the Sith are screwing things up. There's this old Chinese saying, outsiders see things clearly. And while you're not, and that's kind of real as somebody who's not one of the Sith, and this is something that was very similar in the Bounty Hunter storyline, you really do see that the Sith a lot of the time are really impediments to the success of the Empire, more than they are advantageous to the Empire. Now, yeah, having the badass Force users fighting for you is cool, but having so many of them being like insane, bloodthirsty maniacs, not so helpful. And that is a continued reoccurring theme, that the trying to look after the welfare of the ordinary common people of the Empire is seriously hindered by the whims and ridiculous ideas of various Sith lords. So, I kind of viewed that as my agent is like, the Sith need to just piss off and let me do my job. I mean, I didn't take that all the way. At some points you do have to realize, like, well, you don't want to piss off the guy who could shoot lightning from his hands and all that. But, it really was one of the fun things about playing this character, who, even though I was mostly light side, was not afraid to do something dark side if that made sense for the character. And it worked so well playing this character. It's like, okay, most of the time I'm going to try and be a reasonably decent person, but, if I got to do something extraordinarily ruthless to get the job done, or if someone has just pissed me off sufficiently, then, well, dark side points it is. Which, again, just really makes sense for this sort of character. And I suppose you could also say that for the bounty hunter. Again, this is really one of the big problems in Star Wars in general, is that the Sith and Jedi are just at times so cartoonishly good and so cartoonishly evil. And of course there have been many stories that do explore things in more nuanced terms, but here you don't really get that. There is no mechanical benefit to playing towards the middle ground with either a Sith or a Jedi character. You're basically much more better off in terms of the game mechanics to go all in one way or the other. And of course, there's some people who say, well, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm just going to do whatever I think is right. And, well, hey, it's your $15 a month, or it's your time, whatever. I'm a subscriber, so I do get some certain advantages because of that. I mean, there is no wrong way to play these classes, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So, yeah, Imperial Agent storyline, very nuanced, very interesting ideas. It really does feel like a great fit if you're somebody who really wants to get in there for the story and really wants to feel like your choices are a very personal thing. So let's talk companions. So the first companion we get is Cleo Janus, and she's this sort of anarchist criminal who basically gets hired on by the Empire as a mercenary, and she's very clearly just straight up written for the people who want to be like the male darksiders. Now female agents, of course, it's not really a romance thing there. It's more like, Thelma and Louise, sisters in Raising Hell kind of thing, I would imagine. For male characters though, Cleo is sexy, chaos loving, crazy bad girl who's totally gonna dig tearing up in hell and just going crazy with you across the galaxy. Although, and from watching the YouTube videos of her romance options, there is actually more to Cleo than all of that. And I also like how as the game goes along, you learn more about Cleo. You realize that, some of the political stuff she spouts is really just nonsense. And that she's just kind of a hypocrite. She's really somebody who's just out there for herself, and painting herself as an anarchist is really just sort of a convenient cover that makes life a little easier for her. But even when that's all said and done, she is capable of genuinely caring about other people. It's just she's best at caring about herself the most. But she is fun, and she is a reasonably good tanking companion. But she didn't really fit with my playstyle once I got past a certain point in the game, so I sort of shuffled her off to the side. Um, Now the next companion you get, Vector. I can't even not even try and say his last name. He's also a very interesting person. He's was an Imperial diplomat who, while on Alderaan, got absorbed into a Killik hive and became a joiner. And the Killiks, of course, are these crazy ass, hive-minded aliens. So it's sort of like having a guy who was partially assimilated by the Borg, but he's actually cool with it. He sort of likes that this change in his senses, his perspective, being part of a greater thing than himself, even if it is a hive of bizarre bug people. It's opened his eyes to things he would have never imagined. And Vector's personal story, and I don't really have a huge amount to say about Khalil's personal story, so that's why I didn't mention it. But he's just really interesting. He's like somebody like you, particularly if you're playing an alien, who's somebody who's really, because he's not fully human anymore. He's referred to as enhanced human in game. I mean, he really freaks the hell out of a lot of the people in the Empire. And if you're playing this as an alien, you too understand a little bit of what it's like to be an outsider in a society like that. And even though he's still this fundamentally changed person, he is at his heart still somebody who wants what's best for the Empire. He's also meshes very well with an agent who chooses the light side, because generally speaking, Vector pretty much always approves of the light side choices. So his story of trying to build a bridge between the Empire and the Killiks is really interesting. It really does show that maybe there is some hope for the Empire, because if you sort of look at the overall story of the Old Republic, you do see that there are people within the Empire who realize that there are serious problems with the Empire, and that it really would be in everybody's best interest to do things like abandon the idea of human supremacy, embrace aliens as members of the Empire, for example. Basically, sort of people saying like, okay, we really need to just rein in letting the Force-using psychopaths do whatever they want. We need to do things that make sense, not do things because some Sith Lord says that's what we do. The idea of reforming the Empire into something, well, I don't know if we could say less evil, but more rational, more open-minded, is something that pops up again and again in the Imperial side of the story, and you even see a little bit of that in the Republic. You see Imperials who are not bad, who are genuinely good people, who only want what's best for their own people. And Vector's really a prime example. He's really a prime example of the person who is an Imperial, but is also a good person. And that's really one of the things I think that makes him just absolutely one of the best companions. I mean, he really is a cool guy. You kind of you'd want to hang out with him. Speaking of which, you also have a very similar character in that regard in terms of Dr. Loken, who's this crazy biochemist, biologist, something or other, who I don't want to spoil one of his big things, but yeah, he likes to muck around with things that he probably shouldn't. And he also used to be an intelligence operative. And even though he's old, he's still pretty badass. He's pretty smart. He really, really knows his stuff. I think at one point he even sort of brags like, yeah, if I didn't know my stuff, I would not have lived to be as old as I am. And I always loved when my character got to just sort of talk with Loken, because he kind of felt like that, like that cool old guy. I wouldn't exactly go so far as to say that it kind of felt like he was a mentor, but he has a lot of cool stories. He's a funny guy. He's also an experienced, extremely ruthless person. If you're playing the agent as a very pragmatic person like I did, it's very easy to get Dr. Loken to like you. You really just have to be the pragmatist. So it really didn't take me very long to sort of start viewing Loken as sort of, my number one advisor. And the only really disappointing thing about his character was he does have this other side to him, shall we say, that after his initial storyline, it doesn't really become much of a thing. He does have his own storyline too, but again, it's not really a huge thing that I thought was terribly, terribly interesting. And let's see here. We also have. Am I forgetting anybody? Well, of course, there was also Ensign Temple, the oh right, I was forgetting somebody for briefly, but Ensign Temple, and now she's really an interesting character. She's actually a human that spent most of her life being raised among the Chiss. She was actually a member of the Chiss military. So if you're actually playing a Chiss character, this is somebody who comes from a background that you're familiar with. A human raised among your people, which is just really something very unique. And because of this, she, in a way, is kind of a newcomer to the Empire. She's been away since she was very young. She has this very idealistic view of things. And, it's kind of hard not to take a shine to her. She is this very cheerful, very competent, very energetic. Has somebody who just has a nice energy to them. And as time goes by, she gets to see some of that naivete goes down the tubes, and you can, and of course she's a female character, so you can of course romance her, which is exactly what my character did. And she's a very sweet character once you really get the ball rolling with her and getting to know her. And make no mistake that yes, she is somewhat naive in certain aspects. She's also a very dangerous and trained operative. She's somebody who has more than a little blood on her hands and understands that this ain't a kid's game. The Empire is going to have to kill a hell of a lot of people one way or the other to get what it wants. But again, it's another example of somebody that you look at them and it's hard to see them as a bad person. Again, like Vector, Temple seems like a genuinely good person. She's a little naive about what the Empire is all about, but she's not completely clueless either. She knows that this isn't a game, but that these things that she does, the ruthless things that she sometimes has to do, she genuinely does believe that these are for the greater good. So again, it really does go back to the idea of, well, where do you draw the line? What makes somebody from the Empire bad? What makes somebody from the Republic good? What makes somebody from the Republic bad? What makes somebody from the Empire good? Heroes on both sides. Now, she does, in my mind, have what I think is the most interesting personal side quest, which I don't want to spoil because it's actually has some nice twists to it. It's wow, I would not have guessed that. But yeah, of all my companions, Ensign Temple was my favorite. Now, the last companion we have is Scorpio, who's this advanced robot that is kind of created to seem like a female. And her whole thing is that she initially is not too happy with you and wants to kill you, but some protocols prevent her from doing that, and she decides that she's going to tag along with you because she thinks observing you will get her enough interesting experiences to improve herself as a thinking being. And Scorpio, I was never hugely wild about, mostly because I hate the weapon that she uses. And this is just kind of your standard robot looks down on humanity, but over time becomes friends with humanity, or organics, meat bags, whatever the hell. It's sort of like a tone down of everybody's favorite hunter-killer robot and their contempt for meat bags. So, again, Scorpio's an okay companion, but I was never really that big on using her, so I don't have a huge amount to say about her. So, that kind of covers everything that I think I had to say. At the end of the day, as I said, I agree that in my book, the Imperial Agent does have the best class story of any of the characters in the game. It's really fun. There's some great moments. There's some really interesting choices you can make. In general, your companions are all really cool and very interesting characters. It really does play up the sort of moral ambiguity of what's going on in there. The good and the bad side of the Empire is very heavily featured. And I mean, it's just a fun class to play if you're playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I highly recommend it. I also highly recommend getting the Black Talon long coat. It's a piece of adaptable gear that you can get very early in the game, and you can endlessly mod it. Just stick it in the better gear, and it looks great as hell on a character like this. It's what I did, and I loved it. I kept this as soon as I got it. I kept my main guy wearing that the rest of the game, and he never stopped looking cool as hell. So, with that said, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow my me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. So, until next time, take care and have a good one.